from the Ticats Audio Network. This is the CFL This Week with Bubba O'Neil.
We have reached the final week in the regular season schedule in the CFL, and although the contenders have been separated from the pretenders, many issues remain for clarity. This is the CFL This Week on the Ticats Audio Network. I'm your host, Bubba O'Neil. Welcome to the 3 Down Football podcast that explores all the issues with the country's best columnists, broadcasters, and analysts, as we always like to say. Stepping up to the plate this week, certainly no stranger to the Argonauts, Ticats, and this podcast from the Canadian Press, Dan Ralph. Always appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Good morning. This fella has gone to war in the trenches for the Ticats, the Owls, and now he's a contributor on the Ticats Audio Network. Brian Simmons, thanks for joining us.
No problem. Good morning, bro.
Right on. And he's a writer-reporter from the Green Zone, so we got to sound that rookie alert. He's here from 980 CJME, Regina. Britton Gray, it's great to meet you.
Excellent. Looking forward to it. Glad to be here and not having to travel through the snow we got in Regina last night. So.
Yeah, don't say that word yet. We're not prepared for that in Southern Ontario just quite yet. Okay, you know what? I'm going to start with Dan on this one here. I don't know what your preconceived thoughts were. I can only guess what they were. But those Calgary Stampeders walked in a big situation against the BC Lions, and they walked out victors and have, put the pressure on the Saskatchewan Roughriders to get into the postseason, and job done. So, Dan, are Calgary to be feared?
I think they're to be commended for getting into the playoffs. I'm not about to fear them just yet. I just think one game does not make a season. They ran the heck out of the football against BC, and kudos. But now BC's got 2 weeks to prepare for that, and they're going to be back at BC Place with a grudge. So I think kudos to them for getting into the playoffs. I gave them up for dead. I really thought Saskatchewan would win one of its final 7 games to actually get into the playoffs. That being said, like I said, kudos to the Stamps, but I'm not ready to anoint them Grey Cup contenders just yet.
Britton, you were kind of maybe affected by what happened. What was your level of surprise? Or were you surprised?
I mean, a little bit, but it just seemed like the Riders couldn't get out of their own way, and that was really a part of it. They had multiple chances to clinch. They couldn't do it. And ultimately, credit to Calgary for taking advantage of it, right? That's an organization that is consistently in the playoffs 18 straight years. And when you give organizations with that much sustained success, even just a little bit of a lifeline, they often take advantage of it. So kudos to them. I'm not fearing them. BC, Vernon Adams Jr., I think the knee was affecting him. He wasn't his normal self. Dane Evans comes in, throws 3 interceptions. And I don't think Calgary's going to have that much success running the ball again. I just don't see it, but you never know. But nothing about this Calgary team this whole season makes me believe that they're going to continue to string together these performances.
Brian, you've played the game. You understand the fact that in this Canadian Football League, it's not so much what you did in July and August. It's what you do this time of the year. And Calgary look like they're in a good zone.
Yeah, they definitely look good the other day, but I agree with Dan as well. I don't fear them. I wouldn't fear them. I would respect them, though, because they are a professional team, and sometimes it's not about who's the better team. Sometimes it's about who's playing better on that day. So with that said, I would respect them going into that game if I was BC, but I wouldn't fear them. A VA coming off a knee, dinging this injury, whatnot, and then the turnovers as well. Like those guys, they scored 24 points off a turnover. So when you basically spoon feeding a team to give them a win. So I'm not saying the outcome would be much different, but I definitely think it'd be a different ball game, and I don't think that they should be feared. Dan,
their defense really stepped up as well too. Cameron Judge really played a heck of a game, came up with some big turnovers, really establishing himself as a good leader on that defense.
Yeah, again, I think down the stretch, I've seen that Judge name mentioned more than just once. And they're a good team. Don't get me wrong, but I'm also looking at a quarterback who hasn't thrown for 200 yards in 3 games against BC, and if they get behind, you got to come back. And he has a good receiving core. Any team with Reggie Begelton on the field to me is a good team, should be a good passing team. But for whatever reason, Meyer has had his trouble throwing the ball against BC, and in a one game winner take all. I agree with Brian and Britton. Anything can happen, but I just think that that BC defense can be very, very good. And Betts has 17 sacks this year to lead the league, and who's to say that he doesn't get 2 more in the West semifinals? So I'm with Brian. I respect them. I think I give them their due, but no, I'm not fearing them, not at all.
And that is obviously the kind of tone that a lot of people are figuring out. Like, was that just a flash in the pan victory? Give them credit, Britton. I think under the microscope for the entire season has been the quarterback, Jake Maier. Kind of prone to the turnover. It kind of turned into a check down Charlie kind of guy too, as well too. It seems like after being so impressive in taking away the starting job from Bo Levi Mitchell. Maybe this is his time now?
I mean, maybe he's done it before, right? But this season, it hasn't been good for Jake Maier. It's not just he's throwing picks. He's throwing picks at the worst possible time when this team needs him to score a touchdown. He's throwing pick sixes to put games out of reach. We just haven't seen him really capture that, like you said, what he did to take away the job from Bo Levi Mitchell. I believe he set the record for most 300-yard games to start a career as a CFL quarterback, and that just has not been the case this year. Maybe defenses have figured him out. Maybe something else is going on. But when the Stamps have won, it's because they realize that, hey, we're pretty good at running the ball. When they beat teams, it's because they have that run game going. Kadeem Carey's been hurt a lot of the year, hasn't been himself. Maybe that changes, but if it comes down to Jake Maier, that's where the big concerns I have about the Calgary Stampeders is I've seen nothing from Jake Maier this season to make me believe he's the guy who's going to lead this team to an upset over the Lions, an upset over the Bombers if they do get there.
Brian, why is it about this time of the year, and I know this game will be played indoor, where they say you've got to be able to run the football?
I just feel like, and we all know I'm a former offensive lineman, so I love to run the ball. But with that said, it makes you less predictable. I feel like when you're like Calgary, they have a reputation of just, like you said, dinking and dunking, throwing the ball. And it's like when you have a quarterback that's obviously been struggling as of late, why not go to that run game to help him get back in it? Like when I played, I think someone stated that Calgary's made the playoffs 18 years in a row, I believe. Well, when I played, it was during that run, and they had guys like John Cornish and all kinds of other backs, Jerome Messam, just setting the tone and pushing it. So to me, it's kind of odd to see Calgary not running the ball. Like it just doesn't look right to see them not running the ball. So I definitely think that's something they have to improve on while your quarterback is struggling. When your quarterback is struggling, the run game can be his best friend sometimes.
Let's flip the script here and take a look at the BC Lions. And hey, guys, Britton, they've lost 2 of 3 games. And there is some panic out there, I would think. I mean, I listen to some of those pregame shows and some of the broadcasters out west and the Moj and these guys. And I think there's a quiet confidence, but there is some questions about this team. Any concerns that they may not be what we thought they were?
Absolutely concerns, because I think, like I said, I think Vern Adams' knee injury, it might be hampering a little bit more than originally thought. And you want to build momentum to playoffs. This is where you want to be playing your best football, and just dropping a couple is not good to kind of build that confidence and what you need to really possibly go on a run. They do have an opportunity. They have the bye week. They'll get to face the Calgary Stampeders, who not a lot of people have a ton of confidence in, to maybe get things right. But yeah, there has to be a little bit of concern, because this was a team for most of the season that I thought was better than the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, despite the Bombers consistently being there. I really like the team they put together, but they need to they had to start winning some football games to kind of build momentum. So I do think a little bit of concern in that regard.
Well, okay, so then that's a great point that you bring up. You brought up the fact that, you know what, they're going to play in that West semifinal. They're going to host it. And Dan, I think the funny thing is, to me, I believe if I'm a BC Lions supporter, that reaching the West semifinal and winning that game, that's kind of the minimum. Like, this is a team that should be going to the Grey Cup, I believe. Like, is that not the minimum? Like, and anything short of that, even going into having to go into IG Field and win a game, like, shouldn't that be more than the bar?
No, bare minimum, bare minimum. I mean, I don't think you would ask a BC Lions supporter that they're surprised that their team is in the playoffs. I don't think they're surprised they're hosting a home game. But I'm with Britton. Earlier in the year, I kind of thought that home game would be the West Final. And I thought they were on par with Winnipeg. And they did more against Winnipeg in the win than Winnipeg did against them type thing, right? And I really looked at that showdown later in the year as being a game that would really dictate what would happen in the West, and they lost it. And then they lost another game that to me they should have won. I would have wanted to go into the bye on a win, with a win, on a positive note, knowing full well if I play Calgary again, I've got their number. Now, all of a sudden, I think Calgary might go into BC thinking we can catch lightning in a bottle again. And they go in with a quiet confidence rather than going up against a team that it lost to 2 weeks prior. So, I think this is the barest of minimums, and the expectation is the West Final. And I think when you get to the West Final, the expectation is to get to a Grey Cup. So, if Calgary does the unexpected and wins the semifinal, then I think we can all say that, as Britton might have heard once before this week, the season's a failure. So,
Brian, your thoughts?
Honestly, those guys took everything I could have said. I totally agree with them. Earlier in the season, I expected BC to win the West. I did. They have a good squad from top to bottom. But it's something about Winnipeg, man. It's like when you've been there before, and guys feel that when you're going into a game and you're playing against a team that's known to be success, you feel that inside, and it does something to you, whether you want to admit it or not. So, I mean, I'm not saying this. I do think the season would be a failure if they were to lose that next game. To agree with you guys, because it just shouldn't happen. And those guys are very talented. And also, I want to mention one thing too. I believe VA, he hurt his knee against Hamilton, I believe. I was at that game and I saw it in person, and to be honest, I thought it was a lot worse than what it was. Like, I'm surprised he's actually back playing. So I definitely think they should take advantage and let him rest up and stuff like that as well. Not to get too far off topic, but yes, I do agree with you guys. It would be a failure if they were to lose this game.
Bretton, just go one step tighter for me here, just a little bit tighter on this. Great receiving core, BC Lions. A quarterback that, for most of the season has been an MOP candidate, maybe even a little bit quiet on that. A good coach, and Betts, who's been unbelievable. What are the shortcomings on that team, though? Those are the strengths. What do you think is like ailing that team?
Ultimately, I think it does come down to quarterback play with Fernandez Jr. Like I said, he's been an MLP candidate most of the season, sure, but he just looks hampered right now. And we know that even healthy VA sometimes has those games where you see him throw multiple picks that you have questioning. The defense has been really good, but it feels like it's not great outside of Matthew Betts. And you do not want to see how they got run on. That's a concern. If any team gets that many rushing yards against you, that's a concern. So heading into the playoffs, I think the biggest shortcoming right now is kind of refining their groove, being the BC Lions that we saw earlier in the season, being the dynamic team that we know they can be. And I don't know if they have it right now with how much maybe Fernandez Jr. is hurt, and if this defense can stop the run, because you better believe Calgary now will be running that ball a lot when they get to that West semifinal.
You know what, Dan, there was an interesting comment made from TSN analyst Glenn Suter, who, and I love Glenn. He's been a regular on this podcast and certainly says what he feels. Let's talk about the Argos and the Rough Riders. And Chad Kelly, and we've talked about how important getting to 16 victories and tying their franchise record is to that franchise. And the fact that he played in a game which someone would consider meaningless, and he left the game about 2 series into the fourth quarter, which led Glenn Suter to say that he played 2 quarters and 2 series too long. Do you agree?
No. I would have thought take him out sometime in the third. I mean, we've talked to Ryan about this ad nauseum since they clinched, and he's emphatic that he has to get Chad enough reps to keep him sharp, because there's going to be a week layoff between the end of the regular season and Toronto's first playoff game. So, I fully expect to see a lot of Chad going into the second half last week, the week before, and this week coming. I've been really impressed with Cameron Dukes with the fact that he's got limited playing time in the last two games, and he helped engineer the comeback win against Saskatchewan, and Daniel Adeboboye showed you how deep they are at running back. When in my mind he's number 3 or number 4 on the depth chart, and yet he ran for 100 yards. So no, I would expect Chad to play at least a half this week. I expected him to play into the third quarter last week, and he played into the second half the week before. And I think Ryan's been very consistent that he needs to get Chad. He needs to make sure Chad's playing his best football going into the playoffs. So I'm not the least bit surprised. Going into the fourth quarter, yeah, I think that's a little much. But playing a first half and maybe giving way in the third, yeah, I could understand that.
Britton, you saw the game. What were your thoughts?
I was a little surprised because I didn't have the insight into Ryan Dinwiddie's strategy, but I knew he was going to play, because that team cannot afford to give Chad Kelly what would have been 3 weeks off. You need to have him sharp for the game. I thought maybe just a half. And I think part of it was that the Riders' defense was kind of holding that Argos offense in check better than we all kind of thought in Saskatchewan, especially when we saw how many starters were actually playing in the game. And maybe there was some personal, okay, let's go out there and build some momentum here, because the Riders had kept them pretty under wraps for the most part. But as soon as you saw him come up limping, you knew he was getting taken out. That is too much. You never want to see that as just someone who covers the league, or especially if you're the Argos, you can't have Chad Kelly limping. So I thought it was a little longer, but I understand that they want to get as many reps as possible because they do have the bye week. They want to make sure that this team is ready and sharp, and despite the fact they've had things clinched for over a month here.
Brian, I've had a microphone probably in front of you over the years, and many other players, when I asked them about the rest versus rust thing, and to a man, 90, if not 95% of you guys always tell me, give me the rest. Have they played Chad Kelly too much?
I mean, in all honesty, I'll sit here and say this. The first half, I think, is totally fine. I think going into the fourth quarter, that was a bit of a stretch. I understand what Dinwiddie's doing. I mean, these guys had the division clinched up with a third of the season remaining. So it's like you can't sit your quarterback on the shelf for that long. So I understand it's a funny game, you know. It's like you gotta kind of tweak it here and there, and I understand, you know, why he's doing it. But the fourth quarter, nah. Like I wouldn't have had him in that situation. But if he doesn't get hurt, we're not even having this conversation. You know, so it's kind of like when the coach goes for it on fourth down, and if he makes it, everyone loves him. If he doesn't make it, everyone hates him. So it's kind of like one of those situations, in my opinion.
But here's the thing, though. There's certainly a lollipop hanging for this franchise. And, of course, there's a marketing issue. There's, wanting to identify that this is maybe the greatest Argo team of all time, at least in the regular season, and then going into the postseason. Dan, are they motivated by this?
I think they are. I'll give you 16 reasons why they're motivated. And he won't say it publicly, but you ask Ryan public or privately about it, he talks a lot about legacy, and he talks a lot about wanting this team to establish its own right in this franchise's 150-year history. And to do that, you have to win, both in the regular season, but more importantly in the playoffs. But it would be a nice caveat to get 16 regular season wins. But I'll tell you, I'd hate like heck to be like the Edmonton Eskimos, to own that record. And we all remember what happened in the East, in the West in the West Final, when a third place team went to the Grey Cup and won it. And ask Randy Ambrosie what his biggest disappointment is in football, and it's winning 16 regular season games but coming up short in the West Finals. So, they've tied the franchise record for most wins. And I mean, that's no slight either, because the 15 regular season wins were two teams quarterbacked by Doug Flutie and coached by Don Matthews, which is pretty select company. So I think 16 wins deep down is something they'd like to establish, but not at the risk of losing. Because, I mean, we'll forget about that on November the 11th if they don't follow through and get to the Grey Cup. If they get to the Grey Cup and lose, that's different. You got to the dance. You don't get there at home after 16 wins and you're 9-0 at home. It means nothing.
Brian, what does that mean as a player? The 16 wins, obviously record set. What does that mean?
I mean, for me, Bubba, I'll be honest with you. I'd rather have the cup than the record, personally. That's just my personal opinion. It's kind of, remember how Golden State was when they won 73 games and they didn't win the finals? It's like, yeah, we remember that season, but do we remember that season? We remember Toronto Cleveland coming and winning that. So with that said, I mean, me personally, I always want the cup because I just feel like that you're part of history for the entire league. As a player, we always talk, hey, I want my name on that cup. So somebody who looks at that cup 50, 60 years, down the road, they know who I was. They know I had some type of legacy here. Versus like, okay, within the Toronto organization itself, those players, they'll know about, the 16 wins and stuff. But me personally, the cup always outweighs any other season or personal goals.
All right, let's go back to the province of Saskatchewan, and already there's been action. I am actually a little surprised. I thought there would have been it would have taken a couple of weeks for some announcements to come out. We've gotten the news that Jeremy O'Day, the general manager, signs a 3-year contract extension, and that Coach Dickinson will not be brought back as his contract has come to a conclusion, and they will not re-sign the contract. Going forward, you look at what's happened over this team over the last couple of years. Ending the season on 2 7-game losing skids and a 6-10 finish and a 6-11 finish, I guess. Britton Gray, what's going on with the Riders?
I mean, like Dan alluded to earlier, I've heard a lot. It was a failed season. For a second straight year, this team had a failed season after back-to-back West Finals. To end the years with 7 games losing streaks and just be eliminated from playoffs the way they have been, you knew changes were coming. It was a matter of how big were these changes going to be and how deep were they going to go. We all assumed Craig Dickinson would not be extended. That just seemed like a guarantee after what we saw, the kind of effort from the players and some of the game planning decisions. I'm not as surprised as others that Jeremy O'Day will be back. I thought he's done a decent enough job of finding talent in the Canadian draft, and he didn't really get a chance to go out and find his first head coach. Chris Jones left so late in the offseason, it was always going to have to be an internal hire, which is where it came down to Craig Dickinson. You elevate him, back-to-back West Finals, you would give him an extension. And I think any coach in their first time coaching gets an extension after doing that. And so it's just the past few years, and now it's kind of really, I don't want to say a rebuild, but Jeremy O'Day needs to hit a home run with his next head coaching hire because patience is wearing thin. The Riders just had their least attended game since 2006 because the fan base is that just growing angry and apathetic towards this team right now with what they've seen recently. And so some interesting times in Saskatchewan as we kind of see who maybe emerges as the next head coach. If they decide to find a CFL veteran, give a new guy a shot, that'll all kind of be decided here over the next few weeks. But I wasn't surprised. It came quickly because Jeremy O'Day, I think in order to keep his job, had to say he had a plan and had to put that plan into motion right away.
Dan, what happened? We had Daniela Ponticelli on the pod last week from the Riders sideline and their never-ending post-game show, and she was telling me and telling us about fans crying, like actually crying on air about the disappointment of the Riders. Like, what happened with this team? This is a team that beat, in fact, they pounded the blank out of the Blue Bombers on Labor Day and then never tasted victory again.
You know what? If I knew, I would bottle it and I would sell it to the highest bidder. Seriously. But Britton wasn't surprised I was. I thought the cuts would go deeper. I thought it would at least be a GM and head coach. And from what I had read on social media, there were those that thought it should have gone even higher than that. And having said that, finding a new president, then letting him find a new GM, and then letting him find a new coach takes time. And you don't really have that time. Basically, you got to strike while the iron's fire. So I understand the coaching change, but I don't understand giving a GM a 3-year contract and absolving him of accountability for what happened the last 2 years, because he didn't fix the offensive line, in my humble opinion. He went and got a quarterback, and good on him, but he didn't find enough assets to protect that quarterback. And when you lose Trevor Harris for 9/10 of your season, to me, as soon as they said that, Trevor might come back, I thought, this team's in trouble now. And there was, the decision to go with Mason as the backup, that's on the coaches. I get that, because I think Dolegala showed me something coming down the stretch that maybe he should have, had he been the pick earlier on, maybe they win a game. Maybe they go into the playoffs, right? But I'm sorry. I thought the coach and GM, the GM hired the coach. The GM kept the coach last year after an 0-7 start, or after an 0-7 finish. And to me, I think what we saw last year at this time sort of got the thing going that maybe it was time for a coaching change. The GM made the decision to stay status quo. And to me, it sends, the optics are not good that you extend the GM for 3 years and you get rid of the coach, because to me, you're throwing the coach under the bus and saying that this was a coaching issue. And I'm not 100% sure that's the case.
Brian, you hear things that eventually start to come out. Some players start to talk. The word gets out. There's a word, kind of a feeling out there. I'm hearing from some players that, Dickey was a player's coach. And sometimes I'm worried by that, right? Because I think there has to be a level of respect and that sort of chain of command that goes in there. And that there were people in the Riders media that also thought that there were players that took advantage of that. Have you ever seen a situation like that a coach is maybe too nice?
I have seen it a lot. I can honestly say not too much at the pro level. I was in Edmonton for one season, and Dave was actually the special teams coach there. So I do know him, and I definitely can see he has that reputation of being a player's coach. He's just someone that keeps everyone involved. But I will say this, as a coach, you have to be careful with that. I always think the best head coaches, we love him and we want to do what we can for coach, but there's just that small amount of fear and respect that you have for him. You need to always, a good coach, it's okay to be cordial and good with your players and stuff, but when it's time to tighten up, I need you to tighten up. We're going to get it done, and you know what time it is. And sometimes when you have too much of a friendly, cordial relationship with your coaches, players can forget that. Coaches can forget that. And I just think it can kind of set you up for failure sometimes. So I'm not saying that's the case with him, because I wasn't in that locker room. But I will say that it can be a very slippery slope whenever you're trying to combine those two things.
Britton, again, you're closer to that locker room than any of us. Your thoughts on what went down there? There was the Nick Marshall situation that kind of was a hint that something was going on there with the players and the coach. And yet you listen to every post-game interview. The guy sounds like the nicest guy.
Oh, absolutely. 10 out of 10 human. If winning football games just came down to being a nice guy, Dickinson would win the Grey Cup every year. He's that kind of person. Super personable with the media, with the players. But like Brian said, I think they respected Dickinson, but they weren't afraid of Craig Dickinson. There was no real repercussions for these guys. Like, Nick Marshall called him out on Instagram after he said the team wasn't playing well last year, and Dickinson apologized for it. He said that's not right. He went back on what he had told media, and that kind of just showed the relationship. He's always trying to be the guy's friend, kind of be the positive influence in that locker room. And I don't think I think it eventually got to a point where guys weren't afraid to lose their jobs. They weren't afraid of what they were doing. And part of that stems from how this team handled the Garrett Marino situation last year. That situation is still something you look at as something they could have handled completely differently. And that just showed no matter, the guy was given the longest suspension ever in the CFL for on-field actions. And it wasn't, he's going to learn, we're going to love him up. He made a mistake. We're just going to hug him and make it better. No, you have to send a message that that's not acceptable. You have to send a message.
Hold on. But wasn't that part of the general manager's job too?
It falls on him too. Absolutely. The president, CEO, general manager, they all failed. They all get an F for how they handled the Garrett Marino situation. But that's last year. This year, when people weren't playing well, when that defense, it looked like guys were giving up. Like, you look at some of the tackling this Riders team had during this stretch, it was poor. It was awful. Guys weren't caring. And I think that's where the coach has to come in. Unfortunately, Dickinson's personality, I don't think is that of a great motivator, of a get guys fearing. And that's where kind of I thought Trevor Harris was going to be the difference this year. I like Trevor Harris's personality. I thought he was going to be kind of that motivator, that guy to help hold guys more accountable. And when they lost him, you did this whole mood in the locker room completely changed because they were missing that personality.
I think something's got to be said in the fact that with that team, Dan, I don't know what you thought, but when we watched the Tiger Cats basically stomp all over the Riders on a day where they celebrated their, 2013 Grey Cup team and then celebrated the life of George Reed and just came out and played the way they did, it kind of signified to me, and I'm thousands of kilometers away, that something's wrong there.
Yeah, and I'm the same distance, but it was so noticeable watching that that should not happen at a pro level, and I think Brian would attest to that. But it should not happen when you're celebrating, especially George Reed. I mean, George Reed was the antithesis of that effort, and I'm old enough to say I remember watching the latter end of his career where he would take 3, 4, 5 guys with him. And would be, I'm not going down. But to go back to Craig, I mean, could you imagine what Don Matthews or Wally Buono would have done in that situation last year and this, if those players tried to walk on them? Like I still remember Don Matthews being ruthless and guys that performed for him, he loved. But if you stepped out of line once, guess what? And I mean, stepped out of line on the field. What you did in your personal life, he didn't care about, so long as you won games. But if you didn't play well, he benched you, or worse. And Wally, I mean, we all know what he did with Alan Pitts. Look what Alan Pitts did for him in Calgary. And Wally says, you know what? I'm sorry, your shelf life as a player is done. Boom. He was ruthless that way. And I think, I don't know Craig well. I do know that when I dealt with him, he was a gentleman. He was very cordial. He was very personable, and I enjoyed dealing with him. But he shouldn't be that way all the time. I think he's the buck stops with the head coach, and if the players don't fear him, then there's something wrong because then they're not playing on the edge. And I think you want your player playing as if there's something at stake for him. Because if there's no accountability, then you lose 7 straight to finish the season and you don't make the playoffs.
Brian, not to hammer on the guy so much because he's clearly not going to be back as a head coach. I believe he'll be hired somewhere as an assistant coach. But here's the thing. Is there truth in saying that some guys are just meant to be assistant coaches and some guys aren't meant to be head coaches?
Yes, I totally agree with that. And I'll be honest, like I have aspirations of getting into coaching someday. I can sit here and tell you guys I don't want to be a head coach. I don't want to. But it's a lot that comes with it because I feel like you got some guys they say you got some guys that are coordinators and then you got some guys that are head coaches. Like it's easier to call plays and just scheme and stuff. And when you have to lead a group of men, also lead the coaches as well, it's just, I hate to put it like this, but it almost has a little sprinkle of politician on it, kind of. Because you got to be able to talk to the players, talk to the general manager, you're the face of the organization. You're interviewed every day, after every game and stuff. So I do think that there's some guys that are better off as coordinators or just position coaches versus there's some guys who probably they only would succeed, at a head coaching position, so there's definitely a difference there, Bubba.
Well, it sounds to me that he is, for at least the first 5 years of his career in Regina, he was an outstanding special teams coach. So hopefully Coach Dickinson lands on his feet because it does sound like he's certainly a quality individual. The MOP race has been kind of back and forth. Kind of started out Zach Collaros running wild with it, and then there was the Vernon Adams argument, and now all of a sudden, Britton, Brady Oliveira, you look at his numbers, is he a slam dunk now to take that award away from everyone? Chad Kelly was involved there. Like, who do you, is it Brady Oliveira or no one?
I just want to say I love the fact that we're discussing MOP and it's not just quarterbacks, finally. Yeah. Thank goodness for that. He's up there, definitely. I still like what Chad Kelly's done that year, and I don't want to penalize a guy because he just hasn't had to throw the ball a lot because the team has been that good around him. But Brady Oliveira's numbers, there's no doubt in my mind that when I've watched the Winnipeg Blue Bombers this year, it hasn't been Zach Collaros kind of stirring that drink. When that team's been really good, it's because Brady Oliveira is going when I watch their games. It's because Brady Oliveira is running the ball well, and that's what's kind of that offense has gone through. Though, in terms of outstanding players, I think Matthew Betts deserves a little bit of a conversation. The most sacks ever by a Canadian. He set a record-setting season. I think we have to put some respect on that, even though I know defensive linemen don't get the publicity a lot of these other positions get. But Brady Oliveira, he more than likely should be the MOPL of the West at least this year and possibly the league.
Brian, there was a big smile on your face when we talking about running backs. So obviously, are you with me on this one?
Oh yeah. I think if it were up to me, I would say he's the MOP. And the reason why I want to say I think he's 1498 with the yards, almost on 1500 yards. Yeah. I think John Cornish is the last back to do that, which is back when I played over 10 years ago. So with that said, I would have him as an MOP because a lot of Zach's success is off of him and vice versa as well. I also think that offensive scheme, as an offensive lineman, I would love to play in that offense. It's so balanced and it just gives everyone a legitimate shot to do what you do best. But back to the question, I would have Brady there. I definitely think that D lineman should be considered because that is impressive to get that many sacks, in this league. Especially no matter what your nationality is, but the fact that he's a Canadian as well, yeah, he definitely should be in the conversation. But if it were up to me, I would definitely vote for Brady.
Dan, let's not also forget that the 1,500 yards, it's catching out of the backfield as well, too. Puts him, it may put him over 2,000.
Yeah, he's had a great year. Now, let me be the stick in this ointment. To me, if you're going to name a running back, the MOP, he's got to be the most dominant player. I don't think he is. I compare him, and Betts to me, as Britton said, he's had a record-setting year. Brady's had a very good year, and I got spoiled. When I saw a dominant running back, his last name was Pringle, and that's what I compare it to. And Brady's had a good year because it's a pass-oriented league, and yet he's got more yards running the ball than the top receiver. So I get the argument. But who's the guy that makes that offense? Who's the straw that stirs that drink? It's the quarterback. I'm sorry. It's a quarterback-driven league. And if you're going to give Chad Kelly the nod in the East, then I think you got to give Zach a look at what he's done in the West again. And we know that he's been the outstanding player. And yeah, he's shown flashes of being human, but so's Chad. I think I'm glad I don't have to vote in the first round because I would hate to have to tell Betts or Brady, one of you is top Canadian and the other one is the MOP. I'll let the West, I'll let Britton and those colleagues out there, you do the hard work. I'll jump in and go, hey, this is what I had to do. But no, I think I don't want to diminish what Brady's done, because damn, he's had a very, very, very good year. But I'm showing my age probably. But if you're gonna ask me who an MOP running back is, it's a record setter like Cornish. It's a record setter like Pringle. Yeah, I'm sorry. I mean, Brady's he's had a very nice year. And you're right, Bubba. He's done it as a runner and as a receiver. I didn't realize that he's averaging over 10 yards a catch, which is phenomenal for a running back.
These are massive numbers.
Very. I agree. But, maybe he's the top Canadian then. Like I said, I'm glad I don't have to worry about it this week. But, seriously, though, how do you go wrong? Seriously. You're Zach. You're Brady. Who's to say Dalton Schoen?
Hold on. How do you go wrong?
No. What do you think? Well, Dalton Schoen would be in this argument, too, if he didn't get hurt and was done for the year, because he was leading the league in receiving when he got hurt. So we'd be having a conversation about 3 bombers. So, I don't know. I would be happy. I'd be content with either or. And I don't want to be a politician, but to me, how do you go wrong?
But Brian, here's the thing. I know the Grey Cup is a thing. Everyone wants to win the title, but this has got to mean something to these guys. Like, the individual awards have to mean something to these guys.
Oh yeah, it definitely does have to mean something to those guys. Because it's like, okay, yeah, I was on a team that won the Grey Cup when you're done playing, versus, hey, here's my MOP trophy. You know what I'm saying? It does speak higher on a personal level. So, of course, they all want it. Of course, they all want it. And one thing I will say, in regards to what Dan said, is yes, Zach does make that offense stir. But if you notice, all the 3 teams that are having the most success, well, with the exception of BC, let's say Winnipeg and Toronto, both of them have very strong running games.
And
so it's like,
and very strong offense.
They can kind of help you.
Yeah, strong offensive lines too, right?
Thank you. Strong offensive lines. This season, Toronto, they've been opening up holes so big you could probably move farm equipment through them. It's just massive. I would love to be a quarterback in that. So I agree with everything you guys said. It's really, you can literally blindfold and just pick a ballot,
How great is it in the CFL, though, that it feels like the first time the best offensive player and defensive player are both Canadian right now? That's great.
Oh, it's great. It's great for the game.
But I'm with Brian. I don't think nationality. I'm just glad to see. Yeah. We're having a debate about a running back and a defensive lineman. We're not, and we're not. Well, one of us or 2 of us are not putting the quarterback first. So guilty as charged.
But just one last thing to Britton on Zach Collaros, because he is the 2-time MOP. It's been many years since someone's won 3 in a row. The interceptions seem to be a little high this year than last year. His ability to in games, even games that he's won, his ability to challenge and get the ball downfield sometimes seems a little forced. Does that lose a couple points for you?
It does, because this is a team because we hold them to such high expectations, right? Because of how good they've been the past 2 seasons, that just them, despite the fact that they're finishing first again, not as impressed as I've been in previous years by this Bombers team, because they haven't dominated the league like we've been used to seeing. And part of that has been Zach just hasn't. He's played really well, so I don't want to say he hasn't lived up to expectations, but he looks more human. That team looks like they can actually be beaten rather than just a team hoping that maybe something goes wrong that day on the Bombers sideline. And so that's where I kind of don't lean towards Zach Collaros as I have in previous years as being the MOP. Despite the fact he's had a really good year, it's just now the expectations are so high when talking about the Bombers. If you're not the best quarterback in the league by far, you're kind of, that's what we expect you to be at this point.
Can I play devil's advocate?
Go wild.
And I've seen this 8 times with Chad. I just think sometimes these quarterbacks know they're so good in their offense, and that their offense, that they can take their shots, knowing full well that, if we don't if it doesn't work out, my defense is going to bail me out, or my special teams are going to bail me out. So I think and I've seen it with Chad this year. He has gone downfield all the time. Why? Because his team plays such great complementary football that, okay, if we turn the ball over, no biggie. The defense is going to get me the ball back, which they do, and we're going to move downfield and we're going to score another touchdown, which they do. And I'm wondering if that's the case with Zach, because he knows that, I can take my shots, because the guys I'm taking my shots with have shown in the past that they come up with the play 9 times out of 10. And that one time that we don't do it, oh well. Doesn't matter. We'll get the defense is going to get me the ball back, and we're going to go downfield and we'll get the touchdown again.
Well, that's a lot of confidence, right? And to be able to have that kind of confidence.
I think those two guys exude confidence. Chad and Zach, to me, you ask them and they will tell you unequivocally, yeah, I'm the best player in the league. And it's not cocky. They're not arrogant. They're not cocky. No. They're confident.
Can we just say Vernon Adams is out of the conversation now?
No. But you know what? If we're comparing the body of work, I saw Vernon in Toronto throw 5 picks one game, or 6 picks, or whatever. And so you know what? So part of me says, okay, that total is high, but take away those 6, and it's respectable. I don't know. If I'm comparing Chad and I'm comparing Zach, and I'm comparing Vernon, I think all 3 of them are there, and no disrespect to VA, because I think the world of the guy's talent, but those 2 have done it. This guy is showing he can do it.
Brian, your thoughts on that? That's an interesting statement that you just made there.
I'll say one off of what Dan just said, and we got to go back to another thing too. I will say Vernon doesn't have the offensive line those other 2 guys have as well. But I agree with what Dan said. I do think Vernon is coming. But I think Zach is here. I'm not going to say Chad is not here. It's just I would like to see how Chad would do in a team that doesn't have as many weapons. Earlier in the year, I know a lot of people was pushing him for, MOP. And I was one of the few people saying, yeah, he's playing well. But let's talk about this big, giant running back in the backfield that's making him come out and do 2nd and 3rd, 2nd and 4th, because this guy's getting 8-7 yards on the first carry. So, and I'm not taking nothing away from Chad. I think he's a great talent. I really do. But this guy has the team around him, they're just playing so well. When you see a team that is talented and they're playing well, that's something hard to come by. It really is. So I agree with everything Dan said. I do think that, Zach and Chad are here, but VA is definitely coming, though. He's coming.
All right, guys, 1 week in the regular season, and then the second season, or maybe even the real season, begins. But there is some business to take care of. Which season finale has you the most intrigued, and why? Let's list them off. Just 3 games this last week, 3 games this week. Winnipeg at Calgary, Hamilton at Montreal, or Toronto at Ottawa, Dan?
How about Sunday's NFL ticket? I have to do a weekly picks, and I'm just going to flip a freaking coin because I really don't know. You know what? The Calgary game intrigues me because they're going for a 700th win as a franchise, which would put them. They're in a tie with Edmonton now for the most in CFL history. So, and maybe I want to see if how they compare to Winnipeg. But I'll be honest, I'm struggling to. It's going to be a struggle for me to turn the TV on and keep it on this weekend because there's just so much, lack of a better word, fluidity. Like we don't know what we're going to see and for how long.
Yeah.
I would really like to have seen Calgary in a position where they had to win because there would be something compelling. But I think we're going to see teams trying to keep guys healthy more so than trying to go for a win. And I don't blame all 6 head coaches at all. Maybe Ottawa. They want to finish the year strong. They haven't won a game in the East Division all year, and maybe we can see them try and rally around Coach Dice. But I don't know. I'll be honest. It's going to be hard for me to watch something straight through, just knowing that there's so much that we're not going to see.
Britton?
I'm kind of with Dan here. I know that a lot of people in Saskatchewan was hoping this Calgary game would mean a little bit more, but that's not the case. Because it's been busier in Saskatchewan, has Coach Steinauer named who's going to start in the playoffs yet for Hamilton? Because to me...
Yeah, he's Bo Levi starting.
It's Bo, and I'm not sure that's the right choice based on what I've seen from Bo this year and everything. Matt Schultz has played really well. Taylor Powell has shown flashes and kind of helped this team get on track, and there's concerns I have with Bo Levi Mitchell, so maybe if a good quarterback comes out and plays well in this game against Montreal, maybe it puts some shortens the leash on Bo Levi Mitchell, because something about Bo this year, it worries me if I'm the Hamilton Tiger Cats based on what we've seen at certain points.
Brian, it sounds like Coach O kind of said yesterday that everyone's playing.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, I mean,
okay.
The win would be just another number. I mean, do you go for the win? I mean, this is such a unique situation that we're seeing in this league that happens up every once in a while, where you're playing this sort of, I'll call it a dummy game, because I don't think you want to show too much, even though you've played each other 3 times previous. But it was a little bit back, like earlier in the year, more so in the spring and summer. And then you're going to go play the same team in the same building again. What kind of approach, and even as a player, like what would your mindset be?
I can honestly say, because I've played some back-to-backs, like Labor Day on Monday, then another game on Friday, but it's been at different locations. I've never played, the same team back-to-back at the same location, so I'm sure a lot of players will experience some deja vu while they're out there. But with that said, I think as a player, you want to set the tone and send a message. Hey, I'm going to see you guys next week. I'm going to be right here. And you let them know, what time it is, and send a message. Even if you lose that game, let's say just one-on-one battles, a particular offensive lineman with a defense tackle. My team might have lost, but you know what happened to you when you stepped in front of me. So I definitely think it's going to be it's kind of like that game will be a game to just send a message and set a tone for who's ever playing on the field that day. And I agree with what Dan said. It's kind of hard to pick the most intriguing game, because I feel like it's going to have like a preseason vibe to it. A lot of guys coming in and out. I imagine with Ottawa, they're probably going to be evaluating a lot of guys. Teams that aren't going to the next in the postseason, this is evaluation time. I've never been in that situation, but meaning, a guy that needs to be evaluated at season's end. But with that said, they have to know they're always being evaluated. And, hey, even though we're not making the playoffs this year, let me make my mark so I'm on these coaches' mind going into the next season.
Britton, wouldn't the Calgary be going all out in this game? Like, they've got to get ready. Are they in this sort of just kind of resting guys, keeping them a little bit sharp?
I mean, it's about building momentum, so I do get that argument. But once again, this is a game that really doesn't mean anything to them. I think they want to they've beaten the BC Lions already. They kind of know what they have to do it, run the ball. I think maybe you might put Jake Maier out there just to see if he can do it. If you can build some of his confidence up ahead of the playoff game here, because I don't think BC is going to let Calgary run the ball, so I think Jake Maier's going to have to put more of it on his shoulders in the playoff game, so I get building confidence there, but at the same time, Dickinson's been to the playoffs a lot. Like I said, that's an organization that knows how to approach it, and if they choose to rest guys, who am I to judge that, because they're constantly there in this situation?
You kind of brought up a good point about Bob Dice there, in the fact that, everyone's being evaluated. Jobs could be on the line. No doubt there's going to be some tremendous change going on in Ottawa, Dan. But again, I look at the Toronto approach, and again, they're in this situation. They've just seen their quarterback get nicked up a little bit last week. What their approach is going to be, we know that Ottawa, in playing in front of their home crowd, they'll be probably playing real hard. So that almost means danger to me in a way for Toronto.
Yeah, it does. But I mean, I also think that might be a game where Chad plays into the second quarter, and then you get him the heck out, and then you let your backups dictate. And because whether you finish the season 15-2 or 15-3 and 16-2, As Brian has said, what matters is at the end of November holding that cup, regardless of what your record is. So maybe this is the one game that you see Chad come out in the first half. And maybe it's another game where you see Adeboboye get a bulk of the snaps in the backfield, and you rest and you let Willett play, but maybe carries the ball 5 times. And I think you get your guys. I mean, the thing that's impressed me about Toronto this year has been their depth. So if you've got it, use it. And because I think Ottawa, as Brian said, there's a lot of evaluation going on in Ottawa right now, and the guys are playing for jobs, and usually that's a pretty good incentive to get a guy motivated. So the game might be played at a little higher tempo than what Toronto wants it to be played. But they've beaten Ottawa at all games this year, and so And I mean, as for Calgary, I think the team that they've got the confidence against is the team they beat last week. So whether they play they'll worry about having an advantage on Winnipeg if and when they get to that point in 2 weeks. This week, play and then prepare, as Britton said, prepare for the team that you played last week and you did so well against.
It's going to be an interesting week. I mean, some teams are, they've got things in the bag and prepared, and they're just going to put it to bed till the East and West final. And some teams have, a lot to play for to get ready for the semifinal. And some teams, like we talked about, are playing for jobs and playing for what we see next year. So it's even though these games don't really mean much, it certainly kind of does mean a lot for maybe employment in sense for some players. So it's going to be an interesting week as always, as we clean up the regular season and get ready for the playoffs and the single elimination playoffs where everything is going to be put on the line. This isn't a best of 7, not a best of 3. Always an interesting time in the Canadian Football League. You guys have been fabulous. Thank you so much for your contributions, your opinions, your expertise from a player, from media standpoint. We always appreciate it. Britton, you've been fabulous in your rookie debut. You passed the test. We hope we have you back for next year. When fans want to talk to you about what's going on in Ryderville, or of course anything with the Canadian Football League, how can they contact you?
Found on Twitter at Britton Gray. Easy way to contact me. We do me and myself and Jamie on the Green Zone. We have a podcast where it's on YouTube at the Green Zone YouTube page, where it's mostly riders. That's what people want to hear us talk about. But find me there. And then always excited to talk CFL football. It's a great game, and glad that there was some intrigue, and now the real intrigue begins for the Riders as we see how 2024 looks for them.
Well, it's going to be an interesting offseason for you. A lot of decisions to be made. And say hi to Jamie Nye for us, and another contributor on this podcast. Brian, outstanding as always, again, contributing here for us as well, too. If people want to contact you and talk about your old days, your old playing days, how can they contact you?
Honestly, I just use Twitter, and it's the handle is almost a draft pick. Except everything's spelled correctly, just without the K on the end. Almost a draft pick. Yeah, I've had that handle for probably since my rookie year in the CFL. It's just been something that's motivated me.
I was just going to say, what? Yeah, can you just tell us what that means?
Well, I don't know. Okay, so 2011, middle linebacker for Hamilton. Name was Reynald Williams. Don't know if you remember. I remember. He walked around with his shirt. It just said, "I'm almost a draft pick." And so I asked him about it, and he told me a story. He's like, "Yeah, I wasn't drafted. I signed with the New England Patriots free agent, so I wasn't drafted." So with that said, I was like, "Hey, can I borrow that?" And I got a copyright permission, and he said, "Yeah." So it's actually my Twitter handle and my email as well. So I've always had it ever since then. Almost a draft pick.
I like that. Yeah, you had a great career, and here you are with us for Crying Out Loud. Yeah. Thanks for that, Dan. Where can we contact you?
At DanRel CP on Twitter is probably the best place.
You notice that we still haven't called it X, any of us?
No, I won't.
I'm with Brian. I won't.
Yeah.
I won't. And I'm on it so long as it doesn't cost me money. And the first time it does,
yes.
See ya.
Yep.
Thank you again so much, guys. Hey, just a quality programming here on the Ticats Audio Network, folks. We're taking you all the way to the Grey Cup, announcement after announcement, music bands. It's going to be an unbelievable week. You're going to get all the best information, updates. Bill Kelly's got a show called Countdown to Grey Cup, in which you want to be certainly a part of. Of course, we're following the Tiger Cats, hopefully all the way to the Grey Cup as well, too, on the Ticats Audio Network. And, of course, we'll be with you on the CFL this week, win or loss for the Ticats as well, too. These guys have been fabulous. You guys have been fabulous. Of course, drop that 5-star review. You can subscribe to the broadcast as well, too. But as you know, Ticats Audio Network has got you covered for all your information in the Canadian Football League. We will see you next week and enjoy the games this week. I'm Bubba O'Neil saying have a great week.